We are live.
All right.
Sweet. We're live. We're rolling. So, yeah. Well, we won't hold it against you, Dan, being a UVA. We like UVA, so.
Like them enough. Again, as long as they're not Carolina or Duke, we're good.
That's right. That's right.
Fair.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Looks like we got people on, so we'll get started now. Welcome, everybody. I am Dan Siegel. You guys probably know me from ACC content on Twitter. We're partnering up with the Tuffy Talk podcast. Probably do these about once a month with these two folks you see on your screen, Macon and Leighton. Yeah, we're going to talk some NFL draft from our own ACC perspective. And, how are you guys doing?
Yeah.
Doing good. Doing really good. I was able to went on vacation this weekend a little bit and got to see some old friends, but also got to keep up with the draft. And on the way up to where I was headed to this weekend, I was driving on the road and I got to turn on I guess it was the second day. It's at 7 o'clock Friday night. Got to turn that draft on and just listened to that going down the road. So that was fun.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, really, I watched the first round just because I really did expect the first round would be a lot more exciting than last year's first round. I thought last year's first round was pretty bland in terms of, everything that you expected to happen in terms of getting picked happened. But like this year, like right off the bat with the third pick of Trey Lance going, when a lot of people thought that maybe Mac Jones would go, was definitely like, okay, there we go. That's excitement right there. And then seeing the Bears trade up for Fields. So it was an exciting first round. So it was definitely a great draft to watch overall. So
I am still a big believer that Justin Fields is either QB2 or QB3. I did not fall off that bandwagon. Mm-hmm. I know that was the perception of most a couple months ago, and then people kind of fell off. Maybe Mac Jones, maybe Trey Lance. Obviously, that's what you could see by the results of the draft. But, I'm a New York Jets fan. We took Zach Wilson in the first round. I'm happy with that. But
yeah, I will say I thought the value the Bears got when they got for him, and you might see if he is real on like your tier for QBs in the draft being a 2 or 3. If he goes to the Bears at pick number 11, they did trade up to get him, but he could. I thought it was good for them. They did give up. We went from 20 to 11 to go get him. The only thing about Fields that I think is a negative thing from my perspective is he's got a very wide throwing motion. Mm-hmm. And when he goes to throw, he really cocks that thing far back, and it maybe adds another second or so in his throwing motion that others may not have, or he needs to learn to adjust to. But I will say for him, I think he has a lot of a good mental toughness about him that a lot of people don't. And he's proven it. At least he's proven it. Put it that way, because he's everywhere he's gone, he's gotten better. Other than he went to Georgia and he didn't pan out there, but he could have hung his head, could have gone down. He went to Ohio State and got better in my mind. And
100%.
Next step is the pros. So he went from high school to college and seemed to have a good mental maturity to him. And I'm gonna be very interested to see how he does with the Bears, because they've had duds. Like I mentioned, we are not Carolina fans, nor are we really Duke fans. But them picking Trubisky number 2 a few years ago I just laughed out loud when I saw that. That was the worst pick I've seen a QB at number 2 ever that I can remember, and it was obviously bad. So Justin Fields is a lot different than that. So
I do gotta say, I want to give first of all a shout out to George and Griffin. Appreciate y'all saying hey, and make sure everybody too who's tuning in, make sure to send us comments, send us thoughts, questions as we roll along here. I'll be more happy to discuss them. But Griffin, man, for you to say Fields is your QB1, I think that he'll have the best career of all of the QBs drafted. That's a bold statement. It was definitely a QB-filled, draft. But especially now where we're talking about ACC here. Trevor Lawrence. I know from the moment that experts laid eyes on him, they looked at him as like the next Peyton Manning, and really just saw the potential in him. And there's no doubt that dude's going to be a stud. I think for the Jaguars. I think he's going to be great asset to build off of for the Jaguars, and especially adding ETN, the guy who he's played with for all 3 years he's been at Clemson. So, I mean, my money would be on Trevor Lawrence, but I mean, yeah, I wouldn't be shocked about Fields. Let's put it that way. I mean, he's definitely a stud in himself, and the Bears definitely have a great quarterback, and I don't think that Dalton will be starting many games over Justin Fields for long. So, so yeah, but yeah, Dan. So give us your thoughts overall, man. Overall for the ACC wise for the draft.
I mean, the first thing that really came to my mind, we kind of developed this little ACC hierarchy with the amount of picks each team, each like ACC school got, and University of Pittsburgh was the number one over Clemson, over UNC. They had 6 draft picks. Now, it didn't really happen the way like that. That's a very narrow lens to look at it because a majority of those guys were day 3 picks, if not day 2, whereas Clemson had 2 or 3 day 1s and pretty much everybody else go day 2. So it wasn't exactly that way, but it's kind of interesting that Pitt had the most draft picks of any ACC school. And at the same time, Duke had 4. So it's not really like the results on the football field are aligning with what's happening with how many draft picks they are.
I will say this, though. This year, you can say that Notre Dame's part of the ACC. And they had 9 picks. That's it. I'm joking. But yeah. They had Notre Dame at 9, but they're not going to stay in the ACC. So, yeah, I thought it was pretty cool for Pitt. I mean, to me, at the end of the day, that's recruiting material for Pitt. So, good for them.
Yeah. Yeah, no, well, and I mean, like, because the biggest thing, which was, and I know, especially for us State fans, it was an annoyance, was UNC was doing a lot of hyping on social media about how they tied with Clemson for the most, draft picks in the ACC, and it's like, well, listen, I mean, State, I mean, like Daniel Joseph, Peyton Wilson, those are 2 guys that if they would have gone pro instead of State, they probably would have gotten drafted. So I mean, it's and also too, because the biggest thing which I would take away from this draft is to me how competitive and how star-studded the ACC should be next season. I mean, seriously. I mean, for Clemson to only have 5 players drafted, which I would say for them is very unusual because I mean they do have a lot of top talent. I think that they're going to have a lot coming back, and obviously UNC, you got Sam Howell coming back. Miami should be a great this year with De'Aaron King. I mean, I think State, is going to, definitely turn some heads this year. Pitt's going to be good. There's a lot of good ACC teams this year. So for me, really, the draft more was like, it's definitely going to be a competitive ACC year this year. And I know, like for UNC, I know they're super excited about Sam Howell, and I mean, we all know how talented that guy is. He's unreal. So so it should be an exciting year. But yeah,
I will say this about Carolina. The one thing I don't get, everybody sees I'm wearing a State hat. They know where my team allegiance is, and I'm not trying to be like, be hating on Carolina. I think they had a great team this past year. Although I think people, as a State fan, I think people undersold State because they both finished with the same record. But this upcoming season, Sam Howell is it for Carolina. And like in terms of like he is the star, he runs the show. I had this conversation with a few other Carolina fans that I'm friends with, and they were saying, and I agree. And I had this thought before that conversation. I don't know. I don't buy the number 7 in the country. I don't even think that my Carolina friends did either, especially when you consider how much offensive production they're losing. They're losing their top 2 running backs and like I think they're their top 2 receivers. And it's the receivers, I think they could make up the difference. But how do you replace, unless you're an Alabama or Clemson or Ohio State, it's tough to say your top, not your 1, but your top 2 running backs are gone. I don't really, I'm sure Carolina, then they recruit well. Like I know, with the Carolina brand, they will, but
yeah,
it's hard to say, hey, we're going to get back to being even better than we were the previous season when we lose our starting running back, or two starting running backs, and two receivers. I think it's going to be more. I think they might be counting more on the defense this upcoming season.
Well, Max done a great job recruiting. I mean, there's no doubt. I think they're going to do a good job replacing
young guys.
Yeah. So yeah, I do agree with you on that. I mean, but I think that more of just shows that how much expectations experts have in Sam Howell. I mean, really how that guy can make anybody great. So I see and by the way too, Tar Heel Nation, I appreciate that input. If that was only the one account that saw that, that was just one thing I saw was going
very
through.
well.
Yeah.
He does really hard.
Yeah.
But the thing about UNC with me is people got to understand like median outcome versus ceiling. So I think they could be realistically a top 5 to 7 team in the country, but is that likely to happen? Probably not. Everything has to come together for that to happen. Mm-hmm. Most likely they're probably 10 to 12, 13 range, and that's where I put them to start the season. Mm-hmm. And if you look at their roster, obviously they're not going to be relying on their run game as much without Javonte Williams and Michael Carter. It's going to be more of slinging the rock Sam Howell like 45 times a game. But I think the main thing I look at is not the loss in their running back room. It's their defense. And they have so much hype in their defensive backfield. I believe it to the most of the extent that the country believes it. I obviously have to see it before it's true, because I said the exact same thing last year and I was clearly wrong about their secondary. Injuries happened and whatnot, but I think they have a really talented defensive backfield, and that will be really what determines whether they could get to the top 5 to 7 team in the country that a lot of the preseason media experts are saying.
Yeah, no, and the one thing too, which I will say for UNC fans as well, is the biggest thing, which I would be definitely most excited about, especially from the draft. I was actually like, okay, that's going to be really good for him. So Javonte Williams going in the second round, 35th pick overall to the Broncos. I think that I mean, because I mean, especially with the Broncos getting rid of Philip Lindsay, it's pretty much Melvin Gordon by himself now with Javonte Williams, and I mean. Melvin Gordon obviously has been there for a while. He's hasn't really come out as kind of that all down back running back. So I definitely see Javonte jumping in there immediately from game one and getting some touches. So I think if I was a UNC fan, I would be very excited about his potential with the Broncos, and I do see them him being there, as long as no injuries happen, as long as he does, what we've seen him do, over his time at UNC, I think he could be a big time a contributor to the Broncos. So that was the one thing that stood out to me when I saw that his name went across the board to the Broncos. So that was the big thing. But the other big thing as well that stood out to me was Virginia Tech getting 2 first-rounders in Caleb Farley and Christian Darrisaw. I mean, that just stood out to me in the fact that, I mean, you look at last year, I mean, and I mean, I know, I mean, COVID just plagued them. I mean, just absolutely just destroyed them. And, but you look at, man, they had 2 first-rounders. Like, I mean, that, that team should have been up there. And, I mean, I know they're going to miss those guys for sure. That was one of my big takeaways, too.
2 first-rounders, back-to-back with Darrisaw Farley. I mean, it's pretty impressive. Another team that they were not fantastic on the field, but they showed out in the draft much more than a vast majority of the Power 5 teams in the country.
Yep. I actually, so again, my wife is a Hokie alum, and I lived in Blacksburg. In fact, the place I traveled to Blacksburg this weekend. I was in Blacksburg this weekend during the draft, and just to go visit some friends. And, I got to talk about that. They thought it was cool to see Farley go to the the Titans. And then I think it was Darrisaw went to the Vikings, I think it was. And then later on in the draft, they had Diablo go to the Raiders. And, I asked them what are their thoughts about what Virginia Tech is going to be like this upcoming season. They are also, honestly, they say, I don't know. They have no idea what to expect. They know Burmeister is their quarterback going into this upcoming season. They don't really know what to expect from him. I will say this. the tone I've gotten, and I don't know if they will acknowledge. I don't know if it's the personality, but I know one friend in particular who is often around Fuente, not from an athletic standpoint, but just around him more in a personal area of life. He kind of comes across like he's more checked out sometimes at Virginia Tech than you would think a coach should be. Not unless he's not there, but he just kind of seems like, I think after a couple of years ago, I think it was maybe about 2 years ago when they had all of those players transfer out of the program, and people were kind of thinking, what in the world has happened to Virginia Tech? Like, what's going on there? Because, I mean, it was like a lot of, starters that were leaving the program. I think he was having to clean out house even a couple of years after Beamer had left, or 3 years after Beamer left, and basically say like, hey, like, and I don't know this story. I don't know all of it, but it's just kind of been like it's perplexing. I think I had one friend say he thought this would have been Fuente's last year this past year if they had not had COVID. Like, it's almost as if that COVID allowed the asterisk there to keep him on at least one more year. But the vibe around Blacksburg is that this is not looking good for Fuente moving forward. They don't really know what to expect. Maybe he does great. And I would never count Virginia Tech out, especially on defense. But they are, they did have a guy they thought might be their quarterback, also in Quincy Patterson. He left the program. So it's going to be very interesting for Virginia Tech this upcoming season. Again, I wouldn't count them out, but to have the draft picks they do, it's recruiting success. That's really great for them. But I'm kind of concerned for Virginia Tech, I think, going into this season from a more of the intangibles kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I have probably a very skewed sample because I'm only really talking Twitter here. That's where I do the vast majority of my interacting with ACC fans. But I'll tell you that I think probably around 75% of Virginia Tech fans wanted Justin Fuente fired after last season. So that just puts things into perspective. Obviously, most of them won't root against him just so that he will be fired. They're not going to root for the Hokies to go like 4-8 this year, so we get rid of Fuente. Like, that's not their mindset. But it's definitely a lot of pessimism among that fan base right now.
Yep. They're more. It's more kind of like, that's like, I don't really know how we're gonna do, and I'd be okay if Fuente. That's kind of the vibe I'm getting for my personal friends.
As long as they beat UVA, it goes for UVA as well. As long as they beat Virginia Tech, like, that's how the rivalry works.
Yeah. And wanted also to give a shout out to. I know there was a couple of comments here from Street Talk about Urban couldn't beat Clemson, so he drafted all their players, which I love. I think it's that, and they were actually talking about in the draft about how great of a offensive scheme that Urban Meyer's offenses usually have, and Trevor should be really successful in that role. So definitely think that's going to be a great combo. And then Emily with saying that Pitch is top tier of the ACC, which I mean, I'd see them being in the top 5 possibly, but I mean, again, it's just such a stacked ACC this year. It's going to be tough to say. And the last one there with Griffin about how important QB mobility is becoming in the NFL. Well, I'll tell you, it definitely makes them more exciting. Definitely watching like Lamar Jackson, which, I mean, all the talk about the Ravens, possibly drafting a QB to replace Lamar Jackson. I mean, that's just silly in my opinion. But I mean, worst comes to worst, Lamar's going to put butts in the seats. I mean, he's exciting to watch. So don't really understand that, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely getting much more of a faster game, and so being able to get out of the pocket. But also too, you also look at like a Tom Brady, who, I mean, still, I mean, he is the absolute definition of not mobile. And I mean, obviously, he just won a Super Bowl. So I mean, I think it just kind of depends on the scheme and the personnel, really. So that's kind of one thing I would say about that, really. But yeah. So, and then last one there was Streak Talk. Losing their starting QB and Herbert will be tough for the Hokies.
Be Justin Herbert, the running back they had.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. First, yeah.
He's just backing up what we were saying. It's going to be a tough road, I think, maybe this year for Virginia Tech. Not sure. Don't count them out. But kind of like with Carolina even, it's going to be a little bit tough, again, for them to make that offensive production up with you're losing your four of your top 5 offensive players, you could argue, and the skill positions. So
let me ask you guys a question, and I don't think the answer will be as easy as it might appear to be. So we're talking 2022 draft class, right? ACC prospects. Who do you think is the first non-quarterback taken?
2022
next year.
I
don't know.
Let me think on that.
Yeah, me too. I'm trying to think of the positions so.
And if anybody has any input too, make sure to comment as well. Input on that. Sorry, go ahead, Dan.
A non-QB, so it could be a receiver
or non-quarterback. I was going to say, if you said quarterback, I'd say somehow.
Corey Roberson from Wake Forest. Is he like a top 15 pick?
That dude is so underrated. He is so underrated.
Yeah,
I saw a Pro Football Focus had him as like the number 2 receiver in the ACC last season.
Yeah.
He's so good. He could be. Do I think he's going to be? I don't know. I could see. Man, I don't know how to think about that one.
Yeah, I'm kind of rolling through the teams right now as well.
Justin Ross, do you think he could make a comeback? And
yeah, because it was
it's got to be a defensive end on one of these teams that's going to.
Because
every single defensive end went to this year's draft, though.
That's true. Yeah, well, because like Boogie Basham for defensive end for Wake Forest. I mean he went in the second round, and I know he was the stud for Wake Forest on the defense. But yeah, I mean Ross, because he tore his ACL towards the beginning of the season, didn't he? For Clemson,
he did off season. Before the season started, yeah.
That's what I thought. Yeah, so, and again, unfortunately, I mean, most people know that. I mean, once you have one ACL tear, I mean, the chances of you getting another one is higher. So, I mean, that's like the one thing which, I wouldn't put money on that per se, let's say that. But, yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it's honestly, I mean, I know I'm a state guy and all, but I mean, Peyton Wilson, man, that dude's
a freak.
That dude might go early. That's all I'm gonna say.
All right, I just pulled up a mock draft for.
I just did too. Yeah,
it's 2 Clemson defensive linemen.
Okay. Oh, the one I'm seeing has got a Clemson cornerback.
Which one?
Yeah, give us a name.
I'm looking at an NBC Sports one.
No, which corner?
What's the name?
Oh, which corner? It is Sheridan Jones.
Okay. So is this going to be another year where Clemson has 4?
They have him as a top 15 pick.
All right. I saw Xavier Thomas and Tyler Davis.
I said Xavier Thomas is a defensive end. So I figured it's got to be a defensive end somewhere if it's not a quarterback or receiver.
They also have Brian Brzee, but he was a freshman last year, so that'll be.
It's Breesy. It's Breesy.
Is it?
Yep.
Okay. Also, all the announcers have been saying it wrong now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think someone mentioned I think it was Peyton Wilson. He should have won, in my opinion, ACC Defensive Player of the Year last year. He had 110 plus tackles. He led the ACC in tackles. He had how many sacks did he have? Do you know, Leighton?
No, off the top of my head, no. But I just at the end of the day, how much of a beast that guy is. But again, I know that's a little bit of a homer, so I'm not really going to stick with that. And I'm not necessarily going to say that he is a first rounder. So,
I think he might be a second rounder.
Yeah,
I had an ACC Defensive Player of the Year top 3 from NC State, but it wasn't Peyton Wilson. It was Aleem McNeil.
Well, that was this year, yeah. McNeil's.
Yeah. Oh, you're talking next year, okay.
For next year.
Okay.
Now, do I think do we think that he should have won ACC Player of the Year this year for 2020? Possibly. I think that maybe if
there's a strong argument.
If he didn't get injured as much, then he probably would have been out there. But he was dealing with some shoulder stuff the whole season. So, but yeah, I mean, Aleem, I would put as one of the top underrated players in the ACC last year. I mean, he was a guy was not talked about a lot about, but he did his job. So
he wasn't getting his stacks like he was getting the year before, but
yeah,
he was opening up because he was drawing double teams, triple teams, and then everybody else around him would get their pressures and sacks.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm trying to find this final stat line on Peyton Wilson. I just saw something said he averaged 10.8 tackles per game. He averaged.
Wow.
That's
over 10 tackles a game.
Now, go ahead. What's your fun fact?
Oh, that was it.
Oh, okay. But also, too, did y'all see as well? I mean, this might not be a shocker as well. This is the 15th year in a row that the SEC has had the most draft picks in the NFL draft. 15th year in a row.
Yeah.
Just more to them. What can I say?
Yeah, they had over 21. They had over 20 more picks than the next conference. So, again,
all right. Okay, I'm gonna finish this one stat line. Now that I've got the stat line on Peyton Wilson, I'm gonna drop this.
Go ahead.
He's got in 10 games, not 11 or 12, but in 10 games, because you mentioned the injuries, he had 57 solo tackles, 51 assisted tackles, which was 108 total tackles he's a part of, which he had 11 and a half tackles for loss and 3.5 sacks, 2 interceptions. So,
yeah,
and 1 pass defended. So,
yeah,
he's a guy. I think he's a top 3 pick next year. I think the Xavier, I think it's Xavier Thomas.
In the ACC, top 3 pick.
I think it's top 3 pick in the top. Not top 3 pick. No, that's not what I'm trying to say. I meant a top 3 rounds. Like he's
okay,
yeah.
No, not top 3. No. Don't. I'm not that much of a homer. I'm in reality a little bit. I think he's. Go ahead.
No, I'm saying like I don't know what. Yeah, go ahead.
That's what it was. There's no way. I just think he's a good player. I think that Xavier Thomas guy from Clemson, the defensive end, is really good. I'm trying to think. I know that they have that Carolina's got a defensive end that's really good. I don't know where he'll end up, but I know it's a guy state recruited. It's Tamon Fox is a defensive end from Carolina. It's really good.
Solid. Yeah, I think he'll definitely get a good sack total next year. I don't know if he's going to be. I don't know like as much about the NFL draft as I know about like actual college football and how good they are on the college football field.
Yeah,
and it's clear because I look at what happened in the draft and I'm like, I'll give you an example. I mean, I didn't think like Chaz Surratt was a phenomenal linebacker for North Carolina last year. He went in the 3rd round, and then let's look at the later rounds. Like,
You want a pick for later rounds?
A Brevin Jordan or a Hamza Najaldeen. Like,
heck, Daz Newsome for Carolina was a good receiver. He went in the 6th round.
Exactly. And
Khalil Herbert for Virginia Tech. Great running back numbers. 6th round.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And Jimmy Morrissey, he won some award, like the best former walk-on. He almost didn't get drafted. So
7th round.
I think he was. Was he my first team All ACC center last year? He might have been. Was he the first team All ACC center? Is the real question.
Yeah. I'm trying to look here. Michael Carter, running back for Carolina. Brevin Jordan. Yeah. I'm looking at. So one thing that was crazy. Did you see that on? They made a point about this on the draft. They had the Jets drafted 2 Michael Carters.
Yep.
And one played for Carolina, one played for Duke. I thought that was so weird.
Yeah.
As soon as they drafted the first Michael Carter, I had a feeling that was going to happen.
Yeah.
Well, again, that's another situation where literally, Javonte is going to a great situation with the Broncos, and I mean, Michael is definitely going to be getting some serious looks for some serious touches for the Jets next season. I mean, because the Jets are just at this point going, all right, you're a great player, you're getting touches. That's plain and simple. That's how it's going to work. But then another one as well that actually stood out to me because we're including Notre Dame for this. Is Ian Book going to the Saints?
I was literally about to ask that. What do you think about him going to the Saints?
I mean, hey man,
I don't really know what to think of Ian Book.
Well, he's solid. Good. He's solid. Yeah. He is definitely solid. He's not necessarily like jumping off the screen by any means, but I mean, I think that's the thing that you're kind of, if you're the Saints, you're looking at you got Taysom Hill, who is a run first quarterback, but obviously Sean Payton loves him, but then you also got James Winston, who I feel like they don't really want to start just because he is at one point the interceptions leader for the NFL. So I think Ian Book can be a guy that if you want if you want a guy that what you're going to get game in and game out, Ian Book can be that guy. Now, do I think that'd be a crazy thing for Ian to jump in over Taysom and over James Winston? That'd be crazy, in my opinion. But that's the thing I look at him as. I think I see him as that conservative guy. You know what you're going to get. While with Winston and Taysom, who knows? So that was kind of my initial thought on it.
What did you guys think was the most surprising pick in terms of they went way earlier than you expected? Because I had two in round two that I just did not expect to go.
And we're talking about ACC picks?
I'm talking ACC. You could extend it, but I'm always going to be talking just ACC. So, I mean, for me, Tutu Atwell went 57th overall. Jackson Carman.
Tutu Atwell was a great pick. Yeah, that was like, what in the world?
I mean, I worry because he doesn't have the greatest catch radius. He doesn't have the greatest size. The NFL isn't – like the tackling in the open field is so much better. So in the ACC, Tutu Atwell is going to make people miss and thrive in that game. But you need to transform your game a little bit to be a successful receiver. That's why I think with all the receiving depth on a year-to-year basis, taking Tutu Atwell at 57, a little bit questionable. I think his own teammate Des Fitzpatrick is a more well-rounded NFL prospect, to be honest.
I agree. That was the pick I would have said was Tutu. Just because, again, I mean, for a second-round pick as well, and because the biggest thing, too, I think of the Rams is I know that they do need another guy they can rely on besides Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp. I think they definitely need, another guy that, could turn into a stud for them to kind of give them that third option. And I'm just not sold that Tutu could be that guy. I could see him as being maybe like a Josh Reynolds kind of when he was on the Rams kind of deal where, he'll get in there and he'll have a big game when he needs to, but just not on a consistent basis. So yeah, definitely was shocked on that. But also too, again, I think that just kind of stood out to me again about how, Louisville missed out on an opportunity last year. That was one of the things I thought as well. I mean, I think they had some really good talents that they just couldn't get the ball to, and they just couldn't take advantage of. And, they definitely fell off the radar last year. So that was the one for me. What was your other one, Dan?
Jackson Carman from Clemson.
I was going to say he was my other pick.
Yeah. So the timeline for Jackson Carman, say 3 months ago, he was expected to be like a early second to late first round pick. Then I was seeing all these mocks and updates that he was falling into the third, fourth round. And I'm like, oh, that makes sense. He wasn't a phenomenal tackle in college. So that seems about right. And then he, all of a sudden, come draft day 2, he gets picked fairly early in the second round by the Bengals. Now, the Bengals, they needed that position, protect Joe Burrow, but
yeah,
I think there's better tackles out there.
Well, because that was my thing. The one thing which I will say about it. I don't know if I would necessarily say that he was overpicked per se, but the one thing which I will say is the Bengals had to believe in him because especially just like you said, with the fact that the Bengals took Jamar Chase instead of an offensive tackle or offensive lineman. You knew that the second round they were going to pick somebody. They were going to pick an offensive lineman, and it had to be somebody that they trusted that more than likely can jump in there from day one and take over a starting role because they need to protect Joe Burrow, period. And they needed to give Joe Mixon some help. So for them to pick Jackson Carman, obviously they believe in him. So whether that was a good choice or not, we'll find out. I mean, again, there had to have been a real reason why they picked him because just like I said, they had to believe in whoever they picked. And
but again, the question was he picked earlier than he could have gotten him? I think he's earlier.
I don't see him being a tackle. I think he's a guard. I don't think he's athletic enough to be a tackle.
Well, yeah. I would say honestly at this point, I think that there's he can either go guard or tackle. I think it really just depends on. I do see them possibly signing a couple or one or two more free agent signings to try and fill some depth on the offensive line to give some more options to try and work through in camp. But yeah, I agree. He can go either way. But
I got a question for us here too. So I was looking at this with the with dynasty stuff. People fall down. I know me and Leighton are in our own dynasty league. I've just watching those, see where players ended up landing, and when Travis Etienne goes to Jacksonville, James Robinson was a top 5 running back in the NFL last year, and they picked Etienne the first round. What do you think about that?
What that
go
says,
first, man.
What that says to me is don't pick running backs in the first round because they're very replaceable. You know what I mean? At the college level, running backs are very important, and it's going to be statistically proven that they're very important. But at the NFL, I mean, they're so like injury prone, so you don't want to put too much of investment into a running back. But at the same time, you have the right blocking, you have the right scheme. You could pretty much throw anybody competent in there, and they'll put up similar production.
Yeah. Well, and especially too, I think it kind of proves about how tough of a position it is to be a 3-down running back. To touch the ball, 20, 25, 30 times a game. It takes a special athlete to do that game in and game out, and there's only a handful of guys that could do that, like the Alvin Kamaras, like the Saquon. He's still on the border on that, but like Christian McCaffrey, I mean, he's definitely proven to be a guy the Panthers can trust. Touching the ball a zillion times a game. So yeah, I mean
and even they drafted a running back. They drafted the Oklahoma State running back,
right.
Chuba Hubbard.
Right. Well, and that was more because they
lost
of
Mike Davis.
Right, Mike Davis. Right. So yeah, but yeah. So I mean, really, that's what that says to me, and I actually tweeted that as well, saying okay, well now the opportunity is going to kind of fall away for James Robinson, but it'll be interesting to see what the reports are in camp in terms of who's taking more snaps.
But again, to me, it just comes like, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, no, just like because I see like James Robinson. He ran the ball. He caught the ball. Etienne, I would say he's more of a threat catching the ball than running the ball per se. I would say Etienne is a guy that you want to get in space.
I agree
you want
with
to
that.
see him do a wheel route. You want to see him get outside and and make some plays. But I don't really see him as being in between the tackles kind of guy. But yeah, so that's kind of my thoughts. But I mean, James Robinson, I wouldn't really say that he was really more of a power back either. But I think a lot of James Robinson from a fantasy perspective was more just because they had nobody else. So they really just gave him the ball. So
I looked at it as we struck gold at least year one with James Robinson. I imagine they may hold on to him, but I imagine they're going to try to end up flipping him for some value because it's like, well, we can get some draft capital value for this guy potentially or something else for him that we're more confident in is going to be not like a quick spark, if you will. It's going to be like a more solid, but like you said, Dan, it's not worth drafting. Like the Steelers drafted Najee Harris. They've drafted a bunch of running backs too in the past. Now they've not drafted in the first round, but I just thought it was really odd kind of like it to me. It goes more into revealing how much teams value or look at draft stock, what that means to a team. They could have picked, James Robinson out of nothing. He had one of the greatest. He was, top 5 running back, but you're replaceable. And the first round of the next draft, we're going to pick somebody to replace you. Or it just, I don't get it. I mean, it's just a matter of, I guess, again, just shows how much a team looks at draft capital, valuing into a player versus actual production. Because I guess they could flip him and get something for him.
All right, you guys want to address this comment from Streak Talk?
Yeah.
So, what do you think versus Williams?
Yeah, no. Well, the biggest thing, which I would say, and I actually mentioned this at the that the biggest thing that stood out to me about Etienne was that fact that at the beginning of the season he was like right there in the talks of in the Heisman runnings, and I mean just like everybody was like, man, that guy is the real deal. But then once Trevor fell off and DJ jumped in at a quarterback, you didn't really talk about him as much, or you didn't hear about him as much as you did. Now, again, I know that obviously he had high expectations, but I do know that just like I think what Street Talk's saying is that, I mean, they did use him a lot. I mean, again, I mean he is a talented running back. So I do worry about that because I mean the one thing which I will say that Javonte and Michael had that ETN didn't is they had two, top tier backs that, they could, okay, I ran two plays, Michael jump in for two plays, etc. While, ETN, he was the guy in the backfield. So I do agree that you kind of worry a little bit. Maybe does ETN run out, at some point? But that yeah. So I do agree with that. So in terms of maybe Javonte should have been the guy rather than ETN. But that at some point it was mentioned to Trevor. We're thinking about taking ETN in the late rounds, and Trevor goes, "Oh, you need to take my guy." I mean, I played with him for 3 years, and I mean they couldn't say no to that since obviously that spark is there. So
I wrote pretty much an entire piece breaking down the whole debate of Javonte Williams versus Travis Etienne, and I came to the conclusion that I think Javonte Williams will have more likely a more sustained NFL career. I did expect Etienne to be drafted higher, and that did happen. But you talked about it, the durability factor and the fact that Etienne has injury history and he's much more likely to get injured in the future. And also, I kind of did like a deep statistical dive, and the narrative that Etienne is a much better receiver than Javonte, it's not really the case.
Nope.
They just kind of used Etienne because they needed him a lot more, whereas UNC, you have De'Ami Brown, you have Daz Newsome. But when Javonte Williams is running routes, I'm not talking about little routes behind the scrimmage, I'm talking about legitimately running routes downfield. Javonte Williams was a more productive player if you look at like the yards per route run or whatever metric you want to use.
Yeah.
Yep. I will say this. So I like using a website called Player Profiler.
Okay.
It is a great tool for people, particularly when it comes like draft season for like fantasy league or dynasty leagues in particular, because you get rookie, they update stats. It breaks down everything. And when you look at, I totally get, I mean, ETN is the all-time leading rusher in ACC history. So Travis Etienne's comp, statistically, by his measurables and everything, I know people compare him to Alvin Kamara, but his actual comp that by numbers is DeAndre Swift, which is kind of interesting. Travis Etienne had he played 12 games, 904 this past season, 914 rushing yards compared to, which was 5.4 yards per carry, compared to his previous year was 1,600 plus yards on 7.8 yards per carry. This season he had 48 receptions on 60 targets, so that's 80% reception rate, and then 588 receiving yards, and he had 12% of the target share. Javonte Williams had 8.5, not so much different than ETN, but Javonte had outrushed ETN this year. Now again, that might talk back to what Street Talk is saying. I will say this also too, and more to ETN's credit. A lot of times when you see one thing that's kind of consistent in guys who have been successful in NFL at skill positions versus guys who haven't is who is their breakout age. Guys who are just more, had dominated early on, right? Are more often than not going to be the successful mainstays in the NFL. ETN did have that. Javonte Williams broke out this past season, but Javonte Williams is like measurables, and I think they are going to be better. I think they're going to pan out for him. Personally, I think this is a hot take. I think it kind of goes with you, Dan. I think Javonte Williams is the best running back in this class.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I think let's compare him to Najee Harris. Najee Harris didn't do some of these drills. Probably because he knew he wasn't going to look good. And he didn't. I mean, Najee Harris does have the all-time leading touchdown, touchdown, I think in the SEC or at Alabama, 57 touchdowns, I think the number is, or 67, which is outstanding. I think the age concept with Najee being too old, I don't really buy into that too much. But I think the way that Javonte Williams runs, he just on the eyeball test, I think it fits more of an NFL type of scheme than a Najee Harris does. Najee Harris kind of seems a little bit slower. He's not Bo Scarborough kind of slow, or Derrick Henry at all. Derrick Henry's in his own ballpark, but he's not that. He's neither one of those. He's not super athletic, but he's not going to be able to pound the ground for 20 carries a game, I don't think. Sorry, that's just me rambling.
No, you're good.
I think Javonte Williams is the best running back in this running back class.
Do you guys want to talk about maybe
so
guys?
Since
Oh, you go ahead.
Go ahead, Dan. Well, no, just a couple of guys that do this thing.
Oh, okay. So a couple of guys that didn't get drafted that you were just shocked that, like, I look at Charles Snowden from Virginia. I look at Paris Ford from Pittsburgh. I mean, Paris Ford was a little bit more predictable because he had a terrible pro day, and NFL teams put way too much stock into pro days, so I kind of saw that coming. But Charles Snowden from Virginia was one of the only Power 5 teams and the only ACC team with 0 draft picks. And it was funny to see some of the jokes fired off. Like, look at all these schools that had more draft picks than Virginia. Wisconsin Whitewater had more draft picks than Virginia. But what I'm saying is, is there anybody that I'm not naming that you thought really?
I was a little surprised that, and again, I'm kind of stretching here. I think, again, this is the 1 year Notre Dame's in, so I'm going to at least talk about it. And again, he's an NC State guy. I think he would have been drafted low. So it's Nick McLeod, the defensive back who transferred Notre Dame. I would have thought he would have been a 5, 6, 7 round pick. Nick McLeod didn't get picked. I agree with the Charles Snowden pick.
The one I would say, which I think is kind of funny though too, is and I say this as an ACC just because he was in the ACC for a couple of years, is Jamie Newman. Jamie Newman is the one for me that I was shocked he didn't get drafted again in the later rounds. Not as saying he's a top tier, but I mean the fact that again he was a great quarterback for Wake Forest, a great quarterback, and then he goes to Georgia, and then he decides to opt out of the season. So it was definitely shocking. I do wonder if NFL front office kind of hold that against him a little bit, that he did opt out. Maybe held that a little bit against him. I don't know. I do think the Eagles definitely do have. Yeah, I definitely do think the Eagles definitely have somebody that can compete, and be a solid backup, Jalen Hurts or whoever, come the game time. But in my opinion, I don't think necessarily don't really think he'll make the roster per se. I see him, possibly falling to a backup with another team, but I think he's definitely somebody who can go in there and compete. Let's put it that way. So should be interesting there. So.
Another guy I'm looking at over here is Florida State's Marvin Wilson.
Yeah,
I'm really surprised he didn't get picked. He's an undrafted free agent. I don't remember where he went to, but the Browns is where he got picked up.
I think what NFL teams, they kind of guys that they didn't see too much because they played a couple years, they played perhaps even 1 year and then opted out in 2020. They didn't want to take a risk, and I think that's really what we saw with Jamie Newman. I mean, look at it from a smaller scale. Gregory Rousseau went into the season maybe edge rusher 1, maybe top 10 pick. He dropped all the way to 30, and I mean, I thought he might have dropped even more. So Gregory Rousseau played 1 year at Miami, redshirted his first year, played a year, played a phenomenal year.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is he's raw, and he opted out of 2020. So there's all this potential, but they didn't see him on the field too much. So I think that's kind of the same thing with Jamie Newman, where especially with a quarterback position where there's so much is based on experience, so much you gain from experience, NFL teams just didn't want to take that risk.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I got another guy. I'm looking through these lists here of undrafted rookies. Tamarian Terry, also from Florida State.
He fell, man.
He did. He ended up getting picked up by the Seahawks, which I thought that's a steal for them. Especially if they, I know you're mindful they lost David Moore to the Panthers in the offseason. So that's surprising. I know a lot of people were kind of high on Tamarian Terry from like a draft prospect, individuals. Obviously the teams weren't high on him because they didn't pick him, but that's a guy I'm kind of surprised to get picked.
Wonder what the issue is with him, because he's got speed.
Got to be health something, or
maybe it's health. He's got speed and he's a possession receiver. I don't know how he could make plays happen after the catch. If you watched him in 2019, is it the route running? I don't know. Yeah, I didn't look into him too much, but I'm kind of curious. That's something I got to look into.
Yeah, Marvin Wilson, Tamarian Terry, those would be my guys besides Snowden, like you said, from Virginia.
And his teammates, Joshua Kane-Doe and Janarius Robinson from Florida State, both in round 4.
Yeah, it's kind of odd.
So the one question which I do want to ask you guys too is, so the thing that was interesting to me is I saw that actually the Kansas City Chiefs actually traded up to pick Noah Gray, the tight end from Duke. Not much, but I mean they did trade up to take him, and they also took Cornell Powell, the wide receiver for Clemson. So obviously, the biggest question, which I'm curious of you guys, is: do you see either of those guys eventually being, a key part of the Kansas City Chiefs offense? I know obviously they got Travis Kelce, and I know that Patrick Mahomes got his his boy in Tyreek Hill, and McCole Hardman should see a jump up. But I do wonder with Sammy Watkins going out, could Cornell Powell possibly jump in there as probably as somebody who could take in that third wide receiver spot.
You gonna go, Dan?
Yeah. So Noah Gray, I don't see him. I'm not a big Noah Gray guy. I'm not sure that he's going to be much more than just obviously there's Travis Kelce, but even on any other team, like a backup tight end. Cornell Powell, I don't see him being a top wide receiver, especially in a receiving room like the Chiefs, but I think he could definitely be a relevant part of the receiving room right away, be that wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4. Obviously the Chiefs run the spread a lot, so he'll see plenty of snaps on the field. And he'll definitely get his share of targets. I think he's solid. I don't think – I'll put it this way. I think round 5 was pretty much a perfect spot for him as a wide receiver. Maybe wide receiver 12 to 14 in the draft, if I'm estimating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, give or take.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you look at Amari Rodgers, who went to the Packers, and you go, hey, the Packers, we know they need some wide receiver help. So you go, hey, I definitely see Amari as being a guy that definitely, because I know that the Packers, you have Devontae Adams, and then you got everybody else. It's pretty much that's it. And so, do I see Amari Rodgers as that guy? I do. I see him as possibly being somebody that could jump in there and take over, for like a Marquez Valdez-Scantling, or an Alan Lazard or something like that, possibly being the second to whoever quarterback for the Packers, which definitely hot take there. Will definitely, all sports fans will have their eyes glued to what happens with Aaron Rodgers. But
I saw someone make a joke. I saw someone make a joke here that said that the Panthers took a shot at Aaron Rodgers by drafting another A. Rodgers.
That's true. I like that. Yeah, hey, it's a selling point to him, maybe, I guess. I don't know.
I think I don't know. I think they're going to need all the help they can get to keep Aaron Rodgers, because it sounds like he ain't staying.
That's true.
But that's a good start.
So,
I mean, it's something. You got Hayes, another receiver, but I think receivers can be a dime a dozen. But I think Rodgers would be a good. I mean, Amari Rodgers would be a good spot, and then it was a good landing point. Like you said, Lazard, Valdez, Scantling. He can compete there as a ceiling of a wide receiver too. He's not going to obviously be Devontae Adams, but he's got a ceiling there that he could wide open competition.
Yeah. I see we're running low on time, but before we go, I want to make sure I mention my man Hunter Long to the Dolphins. Yeah, that was a great pick. I love Hunter Long I think he could be a top 15 to 20 tight end in the NFL. Now, what they have Mike Gesicki, he's pretty solid, but I think that he's pretty much the complete package. Could block, receiver at all different levels of the field. Could third and medium, use his big body to get open. He's a vertical threat. I really like that pick. I think he was the best tight end out of the ACC. I think he was appropriately picked over Brevin Jordan. I would not have said that maybe before the season, but I loved what I saw from Hunter Long in 2020.
Well, and the one thing too, which I will say, especially for the Dolphins, I mean, just like you said, yeah, I mean, Hunter Long is a great addition that easily can compete with Mike Gesicki, just like you said, for a spot next year. But man, the Dolphins, though, everybody is used to them being bottom tier of the NFL. Man, with them getting Jalen Waddle, swinging for the fence with Jalen Phillips, Javon Holland, I mean, they're going to be a good team next season, in my opinion. So definitely watch out for that.
The coach Brian Flores for them, I wouldn't count them out at all.
No. Patriots are coming in last place in the AFC East. Book it.
Wow. Even with Mac Jones, you say.
I'm just saying that because I'm a Jets fan, and I know I'm just blindly optimistic that the Jets will make a huge run, go 6-10, and come in third place.
So let me ask you this: if you're a Jets fan, do you think that Sam Darnold is hot garbage, or do you think it's not his fault?
It was definitely the right decision to get rid of him. He needed a change of scenery.
For him, I totally agree.
But he's young, so I think with the right coaching, he could still be fixed. But it was not in New York, and there were just so many issues. It was beyond the offensive line, beyond the receiving core. He was just holding on to the ball way too long, making really stupid decisions. The arm talent is there. We always know that. But even at USC, it's not – he had these issues of decision-making and holding on to the ball way too long, trying to make these insane plays that just turn into terrible interceptions. So that's kind of my take on Sam.
I'd be curious, that's what my last thing. One thing I was, general surprised about in this draft. I was kind of surprised the Redskins didn't make a move to get a quarterback at all. I mean, they've got Ryan Fitzpatrick, but they drafted Diami Brown out of Carolina. Did a few other guys. I'm just like, well, yeah, Ryan Fitzpatrick's, maybe a good fill-in. He is a good fill-in for this year, but you're not even going to try to go get one of those quarterbacks. I was just kind of surprised.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's just me. I don't know.
It's magic, though.
Yeah, Fitz magic. Yeah. That's right. Yeah, no, and especially too, I think that the Redskins also should get a bump up from Kelvin Harmon, who I know was an former NC State wide receiver that had a solid season, his rookie season back in 2019, but he tore his ACL in 2020. So I definitely see him as helping out Terry McLaurin. Pat's last. So yeah, there you go, street talk. Yeah. So
I will say this too. I think Diami Brown is maybe one of the most underrated receivers in this draft too.
I thought he was going to sneak into round one.
He's good, man.
I guess another freezing will take him on.
Daz Newsome, I don't think so, but Diami Brown's good.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I agree with that.
Well, we'll see if Sam Howell misses him this season for 2021.
But I do agree it's about the running backs more in terms of offensive losses. They have the receiving room to replace those guys.
Yeah. Perfect. All right. Well, I guess we're about that time. So
That was fun. That went by fast.
yeah.
Thank you everybody who stuck through and listened and engaged with us.
Yeah, please. So again, please make sure to follow us on Twitter, Instagram at Tuffy Talk Now, and at ACC Content. And please make sure if you guys are watching us on YouTube, just go ahead and click that subscribe button for us real quick. Really appreciate that. It's something simple, free to do, and doesn't even change anything, and it helps us out a lot. So really do appreciate it. So thank you all for tuning in, and message us if you guys enjoyed it, or if you guys have any ideas. Would love to hear feedback on this. But hope you all enjoyed it. Really do. And thanks so much for partnering with us, Dan. Really do appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. And for those that listen to my Pipeline ACC podcast, this is basically, we're going to test this out. So live videos on Sundays. We're going to stick with the audio podcasts on Wednesday nights and release them Thursday. But this is what would replace the podcast that would be released tomorrow. So hope you guys enjoyed. Definitely let me know if you thought this was better, you thought you just like the audio better, but I'll be with the Tuffy Talk guys. We're saying like once a month or something.
Yep,
we'll work it out.
Enough to keep everything interesting.
That's right. There's always the ACC. There's always stuff to talk about. Always.
And you guys do basketball too, right?
We do all of it. That's what we just are big. We're just two. At least for us, we're two state fans. But we love ACC, so we
baseball,
follow all of
softball, you name it. Love it all.
All right.
Perfect. All right. Thank you all, and have a great evening.